So I guess first things first is who we are. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit organization focused on accelerating the transition of our transportation here to something that's more sustainable. We are a chapter of the National Electric Vehicle Association, and this here is our mission. We essentially work to accelerate our transition to a clean transportation future. And we do this through advocacy. We work a lot with policy across the state and local, public education, as well as the support of reliable and sustainable charging infrastructure. Our efforts are made possible through the contributions of these clubs across the state. They offer boots on the ground engagement with local EV owners and the EV curious. We have Tesla Hawaii Club, which is a statewide organization, Big Island EV here on Hawaii Island, Kauai EV out on the island of Kauai, and Maui Nui EV for Maui. And to all of those who are club leaders on this call and also members, I want to thank you for helping out with the mission on each of our islands. So I want to jump now into just a few updates, really policy focused. I'll try to speed this up so we can hear from you about the latest successes and challenges. And maybe what I should do is I should paste some links into the chat so that you don't have to take notes. Let me get there real quick. Chat. Okay, here. Sorry, I should have done this earlier. Okay, so here in the chat, you'll have a few links, including the link to today's deck. So you need not bother with, taking notes. The details are there. So first things first, let's take a look at adoption across the state. So first of all, as you can see here, we're close to 20,000 electric vehicles, and you see the stats. It actually should be reading June 2017 through June 2022. So the June figures are close to 20,000 EVs. And, we see a nice uptick over the past year. And clearly this is due to a number of factors. I'm sure rising energy prices or gas prices, as well as the availability of new EV models and also models at various price points have contributed to this increase in electric vehicle adoption in our state. Now, that said, that's cause for celebration, but it's still less than 2% of the passenger vehicles that we have in Hawaii. We have over 1 million gas vehicles, and we actually in June, we burned 37 million gallons of gasoline. So we've got a lot of work to do, but hopefully or thankfully, the market incentives and also the focus on EV charging infrastructure will help accelerate our progress. Now let's take a look at how it is here on our various islands. So as you can see, and not surprisingly, Oahu has the lion's share. We have over 15,000 EVs there. Maui with 2,300, Hawaii Island a little under 1,500, and Kauai with 600, a little over 600 cars. But if you take a look at the change from June of last year, you can see an incredible uptick in the adoption rate, right? So people are actually starting to buy EVs, and that's a good thing. It's also going to present some challenges with some of the things like charging infrastructure, right? Because you're going to have heavy demand for a limited infrastructure. So there's a lot of work that we need to do to accelerate the progress there. Now, on the legislative front, it's been very promising to see collaboration with leaders like Representative Lowen, Senator Lee, and as a result of collaboration with them and their efforts in the space, we saw a few bills make it into law this past session. And there were many bills related to climate and energy, but I just wanted to spotlight a few that we've been tracking as an organization. So the first one is an enhancement to the EV charger rebate program. I don't have all the details here, but I just wanted to highlight that there was extra funding to the tune of $1 million for this fiscal year. If I'm not mistaken, they lifted the annual cap. For those of you who don't know, this charger rebate program is actually funded by the barrel tax. It's 3 cents on the barrel. and that's going to allow us to sustain the program ongoing. In addition, they changed the program details so that if one wanted to install a single port charger in their parking area, they would also be able to avail of a $2,000 rebate. There are additional details there that I'm sure I'm missing, but I just wanted to highlight that this is one. The other is purchase incentives for electric bikes and mopeds. I think it's going to be very clear soon that the transition to a clean transportation future and a clean energy future is not just about electric vehicles or electric cars or personal cars. It's also going to be very important for us to emphasize to accelerate adoption of other modes of transportation, so mass transit as well as micromobility like bikes and mopeds. So this bill or this law, Act 306, is going to provide incentives. I think it's if I'm not mistaken, it's a $500 purchase rebate for the purchase of these micro mobility solutions. 238 is it's kind of distant but related. So there's this greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal, and it actually mirrors what the federal government wanted to do, right? So Biden's goal of 50% reduction below 2005 levels by 2030. And we actually adopted that here in the state. So it's a state goal. And there's also this funding for a decarbonization pathway study to ensure that we're going to be able to achieve that goal, right? There's so many things we need to do: decarbonizing buildings, increasing efficiency, transition of vehicles and transportation to zero emission, agriculture. There's so many different things that need to be done for us to be able to achieve our greenhouse gas emission goals. So this pathway study will help us be a bit more precise and surgical in the approaches we take. The last one is Act 241. Hawaii EV hasn't necessarily been a fan of this. However, we advocated really hard to ensure that this rebate fund will actually be separate from the EV charging rebate fund. So the original version of this bill was that hydrogen fueling stations would share the funds that were set aside for EV chargers, and because for many different reasons, that would have been detrimental. It would have cannibalized the funds for level 2 and level 3 chargers. And given the fact that the rebate for a hydrogen fueling station is $200,000, that would have been very much detrimental. So it's a bill it's a law now. There's funding for that program, and that'll be independent of what we're doing for electric cars. And let's see, I think I have one more slide, and then we'll go into discussion. Well, actually, 3 more slides. So county legislation. And the first one here is, this is essentially really focused on, there was a state law that was passed in the past session, the one before last, and that called for counties to be able to enforce the state law that mandates the installation of charging stations in large parking lots, right? So that law has been on the books for a long, long time, but was never really quite enforced because the enforcement is actually at the county level. So each county has embarked on a number of these code changes that will allow for the law to be enabled. Now, each county has a slightly different approach, and there are many different reasons for that, which I won't get into here. But I just want to summarize for Kauai County, new parking lots with 100 or more stalls. The requirement is that 15% of the stalls be EV charger ready, meaning you've got conduits, you've got the ability to add charging stations without having to rip up pavement, for example. And then 5% of the stalls need to include EV chargers. In addition, certain building enhancements or changes, so let's say an existing facility gets a permit to do something, those changes may trigger the requirement. So they may then be required to abide by the requirement for new structures. There are enforcement provisions, and this was recently heard by County Council. I believe several of our participants here may have been involved in the testimony for that. And I'd love to hear if anyone from Kauai has any update or that they'd like to share. If not, I will move on. Okay. So Maui County, I heard from Rob that, sorry. Let me get back. So with Maui County, I heard from Rob Weltman, the president for the club, that to be presented in the August-September timeframe is a bill that will allow for or call for EV-ready stalls in multi-unit dwellings as well as non-residential structures. And there's also provision for maintenance of the chargers and also a provision for renewable energy systems to support the chargers. And again, this will be presented soon. So if anyone from Maui has any update on this or would like to expound, feel free to jump in. Okay. I'm now going to turn over to our county. So Hawaii EVs, or Big Island EV rather, which is one of the clubs I mentioned earlier, we've been working with county council and have actually been instrumental in the language of the bill, Bill 120. This bill has actually gone through the initial council hearing, and that was unanimously supported. It's gone through 2 planning commissions, and there was unanimous support as well. And for this particular version or intervention, existing facilities with over 100 parking stalls are going to be required to install the charging infrastructure as per state law, right? Now, there are some caveats there. There is this aggregation clause in state law, which says that if a company meets the requirement in one of their facilities, they've met the requirement for all facilities in the state. So that's unfortunate because that means that big box stores can choose to not install charging stations across their properties if they've already installed in one of their properties, right? And this is one of the laws or one of the provisions that we're going to try to tackle in the next legislative session. But in general, though, the existing state law will be enforced here in Hawaii County. And in addition, for new facilities and also existing facilities going through some permitting for new development or new enhancements, there will be a requirement to install 2 charging stations, 2 parking stalls, of course, per 50 parking stalls in a facility. So depending on how large the facility is, you can have increments of 2 per 50. And this requirement accelerates over time. So it accelerates through 2029. And there are enforcement provisions, meaning the stations need to be managed. If they're down and they're reported, they have to be repaired promptly. And then also for parking, if you're a gas car owner or you're an EV owner and you're not plugged in and you're parked in a stall, there will be the ability to enforce and levy a fine on the owner of the vehicle. So these are all part of this Bill 120, and it's going to be heard on the 2nd. And we need to submit. So it doesn't matter if you're not here. I mean, if you're a supporter of clean transportation, take a moment to submit testimony to the council. There's an email address that you can just quickly send an email to, indicate you're supporting the measure and why. And the link that I have there will take you to a page with the instructions, including the email address. Okay. And then lastly, I want to call attention to the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. This is I'm sure we've heard of it, right? It's the Manchin-Schumer bill, the reconciliation package. A whole bunch of, it's like over $300 billion of climate-related solutions, and then some. Now, I highlight here that in the details of this 700-plus page bill, you'll find details that relate to clean transportation and clean energy. And I just jotted down a few of them, right? So tax credits for new and used EVs. There will be some provision around the MSRP and also the income level of the person trying to get the credit. And I think it's going to allow for manufacturers that have already gone beyond 200,000 sales, like Tesla and GM and the others, to be able to avail of the credits again. Right, so that would be one. There's going to be investment in production of batteries and EVs, clean energy and storage, funding of the Postal Service EVs, right? Getting those trucks out there from gas to electric, and then also heavy-duty vehicles, trucks and buses. So hopefully we'll start to see the school buses, for example, transition to electric. And I'm asking everybody, everyone I can reach, to get in touch with the senators. Here in Hawaii, we have Hirono and Schatz. And once this passes the Senate, we also have the opportunity to work with our representatives, Kahele and Case, to invite them to support the bill. And you can easily get the instructions on how to do this. It takes like 5 minutes. I called Hirona's office and Shanta's office in like 5 minutes a few days ago. You go to this link, cclusa.org/take action. The link is in the chat, and you can be provided with the details. You just put in your address, and it'll give you the phone numbers and also the opportunity to send an email. So that was a quick update, and I'm sure you have questions. So I'm going to transition us to a talk story, and I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other. So I guess first things first. Any? Yeah.
Just real quick. Sorry, I put the links to support the bill, the Bitly link, and then for the IRA, the link to take action to ask the senators to support the bill in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynette. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. What are your reactions?
Great. Yeah, that was a great update, Noel. Thanks so much for all that work. You know, looking at Facebook and looking at the posts that are there, as we all probably know, there's a lot of anti-EV commentators, right? And they're quite vitriolic and very persistent. One that really concerned me recently about, and you mentioned school buses and electric school buses. And there was a post there from a photo of a school bus in Connecticut, which just recently, evidently at something like 7 a.m. in the morning, just went up in flames. And they couldn't get the bloomin', you know, it's hard to put those fires out. And commentators were all over that. And I Googled it independently, and it seemed like it was for real. It was not fake news. And it just bothers me that this is happening, and I'm sure it bothers all of us. And I wonder how we can not have it keep happening.
Well, good. Thanks for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that. Does anyone have any addition thing to add to that or comment? I have some thoughts, but I'd like to open it up to others as well. So I guess one thing, and feel free to jump in. This is, again, supposed to be a casual conversation. So I guess one thing to take into account is, well, one, it does happen, right? I mean, it's rare, but it does happen. The bigger question is, how often do we see things like this in buses in general or vehicles in general, right? Is it if you know, there's certainly a lot of focus on the electric vehicle because it's new. You know, there's a lot of controversy around it. There's an us versus them type of dialogue that's occurring. There's, you know, concern and fear that, you know, their favorite gas vehicles are going the way of the dodo because manufacturers have declared that they're not going to be producing EVs in the future, and so on and so forth, right? To even, you know, people on the road trying to outdo each other and seeing that their supercar is actually outrun by a Nissan Leaf or something. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to you know, for the concern, for the, you know, the negativity. But when we get down to the data and the facts, you know, the concern about, oh, these EVs catch on fire, you know, you look at what's happening actually in general, vehicles in general, right? Internal combustion engine cars getting on fire. And I haven't seen the stats lately, but it's, you know, it's night and day. And so that would be one reaction to it. There's a lot of sensationalism that's associated with anything that goes wrong with an electric car. And it's you know, it's not just a fire, it's someone running out of energy on the side of the road, or, you know, batteries needing to be replaced, things like that. What do others think?
I guess I just wanted to add one little bit to that is like in Hawaii, we have the 808 coal rollers, which is this sort of group that believe in going back to coal. And I've seen on the 130, what they have is they've outfitted their engines so that it blasts out black smoke. And I've literally seen one of those trucks pull up on the highway beside a Prius and then press their accelerator and blast the Prius in black smoke. And I just observed it myself. I was driving behind. So it's definitely something that's on the island as well.
I can actually been a longtime supporter of electric buses, especially school buses. The electric school buses have a rather predictable use time. That is, in the morning, collecting the kids and then returning them home in the afternoon. And those batteries, those vehicles and their batteries are idle midday to soak up all this great solar that we have here in the islands. So, and again, there's no awful diesel soot, which are damaging to little young lungs. So, I very much support electric.
I like to add something about the flammability of EV batteries. Those fires tend to start really slowly, so you usually get a lot of time to get out. There's smell and whatnot. Whereas a gas car, that can spread really, really fast. So, it's actually safer to be in an EV fire than it is in a gas fire. The only thing is it takes a really long time to put out the fire, because once it gets started, it's pretty much impossible to turn off.
Good point, Clem.
Yeah,
And,
it was just real unfortunate. Evidently, the Connecticut School District bought a dozen electric buses, and they were pretty darn expensive. I think they were close to $250,000 each, and they pulled the 12 of them out of service. And I just Googled the link. There it is. And I don't want to belabor the point. I mean, I don't want anybody's vehicle to catch fire, ice or electric, but it certainly is fuel for negative comments on Facebook, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, that's an interesting echo chamber. I just wanted to add one more thing to what Keith had described, and it's really an important one to take into account, and that is the value of reducing local air pollution, right? Especially with transportation where our kids are involved. I mean, you can imagine being at a bus stop, a diesel engine running, and all that exhaust exposing our kids to all these toxins. It's unacceptable. And there are better alternatives, that we have today. There is a cost concern, but that those are becoming less and less of an issue. And there are opportunities for local governments to leverage federal funding to facilitate the transition of their fleet. Right? If we can focus on school buses, I think that'll be a very, very positive thing for our keiki.
May I add something?
Yes, Robert.
The technology is just moving so fast in batteries, and the story about the school bus fires probably was a lithium-ion battery. That obviously we know a lot about those things. That when they're in mass, they can start a fire. But the new technology in batteries that is moving fast, and if we have this additional funding from the government, it'll go faster. And the idea of school buses is, that's just obvious. We've been running since 2015. We've been running on our EV off of our roof-mounted solar, and I've said since 2015 I drive on sunshine. My bill to be grid tied is $25 a month, which sure beats the $200 a month I was paying for gas in my van. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Hats off to you. You're running on sunshine.
Exactly.
Or driving on sunshine.
Driving on sunshine. I sing that song while I'm driving sometimes.
So I have a 2017 Bolt, and the batteries have been recalled because there have been fires on the mainland. There have not been any in Hawaii. And I just got a date. They'll replace all my batteries with another 8-year warranty in my 2017 with new batteries that are manufactured now from a more reliable place. And so that feels like I've been parking outside of my garage, although I charge it during the day, so I keep an eye on it because it says do not charge your Bolt in a building of any kind or near a building because they think it might catch on fire. Well, that hasn't happened in the last year and a half that I've been waiting for the new batteries. So just wanted to add that. The recall is, so it's on my warranty.
Yeah. Yeah, there are quite a few folks I know that have gone through that. And for some, actually, even getting more range as a result of the upgrade. So that's been a very positive thing. And Chevy Bolt and EUV, the two models that they have, they've actually they recently announced price cuts, right, which make them even more affordable. So given the concerns or the actual recall that's transpired, I don't know, it seems like they would have made their solution bulletproof, right? So these could possibly be great deals for people looking for affordable EVs.
Right. I have one coming next week at 2022 EUV.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm excited.
Where are you located?
On Maui.
What? Maui. Okay. Great.
Yeah, from
great.
Jim Falk, Chevy.
Nice.
Yeah. And our PV system supplies more than enough power to charge. I get almost 250 miles per charge on the 2017.
Wow.
Which is
Nice.
a lot. But I go downhill. I live up in Olinda, so I'm recharging a lot.
But you have to go back uphill.
Yeah, that's true, but it does widen your mileage in general significantly.
That's great. Anybody else have any EV stories to tell?
Well, it's not an EV story, but I appreciate the conversation. I agree with about everything that's been said. And one thing I want to say about buses, electrification of public transportation is, it's really a great idea because, frankly, EVs are not going to solve the traffic problems. Mm-hmm. So we really want to support public transportation as best we can. Also, solar and EVs are a fabulous combination too. I haven't paid for electricity since 2013.
Stuart, I agree with what you said about the importance of not just relying on the passenger vehicle as the solution, electric cars for as a solution for our transportation challenge. I think that mass transit and, importantly, a truly multimodal solution that allows for someone who doesn't want to have a car, can't afford a car, can't own a car, for them to be able to get from point A to point B. And the first part of it might require a solution to take them to where the buses are. And it may require another solution at the end of that to take them from the terminus of the bus ride to their destination. So shared mobility, the ability to utilize, maybe a bike in conjunction with mass transit. Some of these solutions are not novel. I mean, they're being used all over the globe, but being able to make it happen here by virtue of reliable public transportation might allow us to make it happen, for everybody or for anyone who wants to use it. So we can. We have over 1 million cars in the state, and we need to decarbonize ASAP. So trying to say, oh, we're going to have 1 million cars by X date that are electric or zero emission is, it's a fool's errand, right? I mean, we need to figure out how to do it in a just way, and just swapping over cars is not the solution. It's a big part of it, but not the solution.
No, this is Dave. I'll actually take that as a lead-in for me. That's one of the things that I was trying to do, this Miata swap. Trying to get the Leaf drivetrain in there. One is to just learn about that process, but I see that as being a need and an opportunity out here in Hawaii. There's a lot of old cars. The electric vehicles right now, aren't terribly affordable for those folks that do have limited budgets for transportation. And so I'm looking at how to do that affordably on a personal level, but at a business side, there are a lot of mainland companies that provide parts, kits, services. Some of the states actually have tax incentives or other incentives to convert cars from petroleum, gas or diesel over to electric. So I'm looking to advocate for those types of projects here in Hawaii, and I'm going to try and start leaning that way.
I turned the volume.
See if we get an organization community to help with that. I'm not sure if it's a business or a nonprofit or something, but some kind of organization I think would really fit the bill. And my price target for the Miata is to try and get it all done within $10,000. And I think that's pretty reasonable to have a vehicle that people might want to look. It's not necessarily a 4-door passenger car, but something like that, or these ubiquitous Toyota trucks at a reasonable price. I think it's something that would help with that conversion.
Thank you. I will just comment on that, and I see Kevin has his hand up. Yeah, indeed, there are all these outfitters on the mainland that will sell you kits, right? You can actually buy the battery packs, the motors, the controllers, all that good stuff. And that was one of the things I'm really interested in as well. Is is there a way for a company to exist here that would allow for the refurbishment of existing vehicles? Because there's a lot of life in some of these gas vehicles, and the carbon footprint of getting rid of them, is just, we tend to not even think about that. But if there was a way to make them more useful and continue their life as zero emission vehicles and do that in a cost effective way, that's more power to Hawaii. So I will say that here on Hawaii Island, there are people that are doing it. And David, maybe there's an opportunity for us to connect so that maybe there's a collaboration of people with similar intentions. So if you can message me with your email address, I'll introduce you to the gentleman here who's actually doing the conversions as well. He's actually converted a Nissan 350 or something like that.
One thing that I think is important for people on Maui to realize is you can get away with a lot less range in Maui because you can't drive very far. And you're driving much slower speeds, which increases your range. Another thing that people don't understand is EVs get worse mileage the faster you go, whereas with ICE cars, if you're sitting in traffic, you're burning fuel, so your most efficient speed is actually higher. And so your highway mileage is better than your urban driving, but Maui is really ideal. I mean, you could probably get away with 80-mile range in Maui, especially if you could have more destination chargers where you might go shopping.
Yeah,
so and using less battery means you don't have to pay as much because the big price in EVs is the battery. So that would be a big thing if the conversions could be done with sort of smaller batteries.
Good point. Kevin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I figured that's better than just blurting out. And so I had a couple things that I wanted to address. I had a 2020 Model 3, and I had actually rented it out on Turo, and I found a lot of issues with that. I had to tell, renters that I would have, you should really only rent it if you're in Wailea or Kaanapali, because the infrastructure for charging wasn't very present. And if they weren't staying at a place that had charging, I encountered a lot of frustration, especially when Tesla owners from the mainland would come over here and rent my Tesla, and they'd be like, there's no superchargers here at all. And so tangenting on that aspect of the lack of chargers here on Maui, I live on Maui. On Maui, we saw many chargers go offline during the pandemic, and they still haven't come on. And I understand those were from early generations from the LEAF program and the promotions that had gone on in the islands. But if, that like infrastructure is there electrically and it's just the modules need to be updated, I feel like that's something that needs a lot more support. And then like one of the other gentlemen was saying for switching more, we have 1 million cars, as you said, and then we're trying to switch over. I think you need the charging and the solar infrastructure in order to make that, because I think there's a lot of people right now that look at, oh, am I going to get an EV? And I know several people in my community have opted for a hybrid just because there's not charging everywhere. There's not necessarily the network. And on Maui specifically, I think like a strategic network of maybe 6 or 7 locations that were to have a dozen chargers could really make a huge impact for the community, especially if you were to take a more utopian approach. And I've been researching, and I started a nonprofit for trying to put this together, of acquiring empty land space and then creating it not only to just be a glorified parking lot with chargers, but to sort of tie it in with community space, because the nature of charging, you want it to be adjacent to local businesses to support them. They're going to put chargers at the Walmarts and the Costco and whatever. And there's Bill 120, which is going to be doing enforcement of that new law that I think had gone into past the beginning of this year, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that enforcement being put in, and I think that testimony is on the first, right? That's going to be really pivotal. But I think a real strategic approach to putting, sort of charge parks. So it's a combination of green space, community space, farmers market. It's all solar canopy, lots of greenery. It's not just going to be, another asphalt lot where, cars can get broken into. It's a really sort of bring the idea of community and the technology together. I think that's going to be, we should have iconic projects like this as Hawaii. I think that, I've been working with Rivian, and I've tried reaching out with Tesla for bringing stuff here. And a lot of the response I get is that we're just a small market. There's not enough cars here for them to pay attention. And it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg right now, that a lot of EV owners are able to make the switch because they have PV on their homes. And for a lot of people, and it's a hot topic right now with affordable housing and rising rents, a lot of renters, if they're like, oh, and rocketing gas prices, you want to cut your gas bill, switch to an EV, well, then you're just going to be paying MECO outrageous electricity prices that are really just powered off of our diesel plant. We're not at 100% renewable here on Maui. So I think that it's important to take a full spectrum picture if we're going to provide solutions. And I'm putting my name out there. I'm Kevin, the founder of Maui Sustainable Solutions, and I actively seek these things and work together with people that are interested. So
thank you.
I'm driving, so I can't raise my hand on things. But one thing, speaking of MECO, is one thing that's a little weird about electricity generation in Maui is it's kind of upside down compared to what goes on the mainland, because the cheapest electricity is during the daytime, because there's kind of an excess amount of electricity being generated by solar. So what should be done is that people should be encouraged to charge during the day, which means having more electricity or more chargers available at shopping and work areas, so that MECO can balance out the load. And it's not a good idea to charge at night when when there's no solar generation. And if you look at the time of use charges, it's in fact reflects that there's too much electricity during the day and not enough at night. So that's another argument for that.
If we wanted people charging during the day, well, most of the time people are going to be either, at school or work of some sort. Well, at least for Maui, who's our largest employer on the island? It's the hotel industry. So not only do they have the EV charging network for their guests, which would be a great asset, they have it for their employees. So I think, to the hospitality industry and encouraging them. I know the Wailea just built a giant solar system during the pandemic, or they got it finished. They started before, and it doesn't even begin to cover their full electric need. However, it's a start, but there's no EV charging at all. And I think that a lot more residents and a lot more tourists would make EV switch. There'd be viable businesses in creating diversified jobs in EV rental and EV maintenance and transitioning old ICE vehicles to EV if the infrastructure was there. And I think that the hospitality, who arguably has the money, should sort of step up and be leaders in that space.
Thanks, Kevin. Mojo, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments. My first one was about the broken charges. Does the Bill 120 address the issue of broken charges? It does.
Yes.
So there is a good enforcement, because like Home Depot in Hilo, it's broken for 2 years and the government charges. Okay, great. And the second part is related to everyone else's comments about solar chargers and stuff like that. There has been one solar charger that's come on in Hawaii. Greenvest, the company over here, was able to set up one. And it is so much nicer to use the Greenvest one because, number one, it's a charger, a public charger that is run by solar. But number two, it gives shelter to the car. So the solar panels actually leave the car cooler. So instead of charging at another station where you have to leave the car for hours and you come back and the car is really hot, under a solar charger, you actually have a cooler car when you come back in. So I guess I wanted to find out, because as a couple of the other speakers were saying, a lot of the grid right now is still connected to fossil fuels. Things like Home Depot to have solar chargers and to cover their vast parking lots a bit. Is there any provision, or are we working in any way to push that more forward? Because the company Greenvest, I spoke to one of the people there, and they said it's really been difficult to get any government or private facility to allow them to set up their chargers on Big Island.
So there were a number of really important points that were raised by a few of us here just a moment ago. I've taken notes, and we have a recording here, so we'll be able to take these further. But Mojo, to answer your question, so Greenvest's solution is a sort of like a pilot. It's a secondhand device that was brought over by the founder, and it is residing at the community college. It is providing some good benefit. And it could be ideal in certain locations, right? It's level 2 charging. It's dependent on, the amount of solar production during the course of the day, the size of its battery pack, et cetera. So it does have some value. It is pricey, but for some situations, it may actually be the solution, right? So if the county, for example, needs to have charging in a certain remote location, for the public and also for their fleet, then this would be a solution, because to bring the infrastructure may be very cost prohibitive, right? So I think it has a role to play in terms of placement, but it's again, it's a level 2, and it's pricey compared to, let's say, another level 2 that has adequate access to the grid. The point about getting more solar canopies and mandating that, there's something to be considered here, and that is, the cost of making these things happen, right? To call for businesses and entities to actually do stuff requires that we also take into account what it means from a cost perspective, from an economics perspective. What the state has done and what the county is attempting to do is create the incentives, right? Provide ways to offset the cost of the investment. HECO is also playing a role in this. They have a docket which, if passed, would allow for make-ready projects where they would actually bring the infrastructure to a location. So instead of having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a charging station installed, the utility would pay for getting the electricity to the site, and the site owner would then pay for getting the actual infrastructure, the actual charging station. So there are a lot of moving parts here. There's not one, even just talking about EVs, there's so many different angles, as we talked about, in terms of, incentivizing work, charging during certain times of the day, enabling workplace charging. There's so many different things that we just talked about, and they're all important. and we're going to have to figure out how to prioritize them and also ensure that we think from a systemic perspective. So, for example, in the last legislative session, there was a bill to encourage the conversion of rental fleets to electric by a certain date. But to mandate that without necessarily taking into account what would be required for the customers, the renters, to have a good experience, we take for granted the fact that you're going to need a lot of public charging so that they're going to be able to use those electric cars. The absence of that would mean that you could bring the cars, but the renters will not rent them because there's not adequate charging, right? So there's a lot here that we're talking about. You've all surfaced quite a bit of great opportunities and ideas that we need to take action on. And we have a number of leaders here who will hopefully be able to step up and help us make that happen. I see someone in the chat. Keith, you just posted something. Oh, okay. Anybody else with any ideas or comments, suggestions, concerns?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that the federal law also supports a incentive for buying used electric vehicles, $4,000.
Yep.
So if you can't afford a new one, then buying a used one is becoming an alternative.
Yes.
So I think that's really an opportunity. I want to say something about workplace charging. Workplace charging is one of the ideal applications for EV charging because typically people they're there all day long, and it's the time when there's a massive amount of solar that's being supplied to the grid, and it can take advantage of that. The other point I wanted to make was that even though you may not even be able to put solar on your house, what would be really good to support is what is called community solar. It's happening around the country, and it enables people to buy into the solar system that's not sited on their property. And there's many applications that could be really useful for that. The other thing I wanted to say was that Costco has EV charging. They have a little bit of EV charging, not very much, but they have a solar system above their parking lot on Maui. So.
Great, Stuart. No, these are excellent points. I just wanted to also comment about the grid, or maybe the requirement for someone to have solar on the roof for them to be able to appreciate the benefits of EVs. I think that even with with someone charging off the grid, it's very, very possible, very likely, actually it is a reality, that it would still be better than buying gas and dealing with the inefficiencies of gasoline, the price volatility, and so on and so forth. So it may not be as economically beneficial as having solar on the roof, but it's still when you take into account total cost of ownership, et cetera, the EVs will still come out ahead. So that's one consideration. The other thing too is that Hawaii has a very aggressive goal to decarbonize its grid, right? Each island has its own strategy. Kauai is making a lot of headway there. Big Island is at 60% or something like that. So this state of or this concern around the fact that we're still utilizing some fossil fuels in our grid, it is a reality. But the reality is also that we have a mandate to decarbonize our grid, and it's a fairly aggressive one. We're making progress. We're almost out of time. And Ron, yes, you have your hand up. I'll give you that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to put a plug in for the Big Island here, Kona. If you happen to need charging at the level 2 in Kona, the Kaiser Permanente facility out there towards Costco on the Queen K Highway has a whole raft load of EV parking stalls. And you don't have to be a Kaiser member. Anybody can show up, and it's worked very well for us. When we need an appointment over there, if it takes an hour, we get an hour of charging, and it's beautiful. So just throw that out there.
Thanks, Ron. By the way, and then I'll get to Kevin. I recently had the opportunity to charge at the West Hawaii Community Center. Is that what you call it? Civic Center over in Kona, and they actually have a bank of level 2s as well as 240 outlets in a covered part of their their facility. They have this covered parking with solar canopies, et cetera. But I was able to plug. It's actually open to the public, and I was able to charge there. So the car's out of the elements. It's cool, and Not all of the level 2s are working, so they're in the process of repairing or replacing those. But I just want to call attention to that one as well. Kevin?
Go. Oh, sorry.
Something else I just wanted to add to the conversation aspect of culture in the islands and a working culture. And so many people rely on trucks for work and just for their families, for, going out to the beach day if they want to bring their paddle kayaks. And a lot of jobs require trucks, doing landscaping is a giant industry. And then, of course, shipping. And right now in the EV market, there's 1 or 2 trucks available. The Rivian is just hitting the market, but they don't have any of their infrastructure here. And they're not going to be at scale. But in 5 years from now, you're going to have the Tesla Cybertruck, you're going to have the F-150 Lightning, and you've got the Tesla semis. And there's a whole industry of shipping. All of our goods, as we know, for our economy, that stuff is imported. And so it's really important that before the EV manufacturers get all of the trucks up to scale to where they can start populating the islands, I think it's really important over the next 4 or 5 years that we really get the infrastructure in place and really start thinking about at scale for providing solutions for that. Because when, like a landscaping company or, a shipping company has the option to switch to electric, and while they're docking and unloading or working, they're able to charge. I think having that, a system, a network of strategically located chargers is going to really enable that. And, and I'm hoping that from this conversation, I can network with other like minds, because on Maui, that's sort of my home turf. It's my home. I've mapped out empty lots that exist and found the prices on them. And I've begun to sort of build the plan. And I've worked together with Rivian for the past year about what they need to build their DC system. There's a lot of excitement, but it just really needs some people coming together and some great minds working on it, because it's not something to rely on the government to just. Private sector, with government incentives is really what's going to provide the solution.
Thank you, Kevin.
If I can jump in.
Sorry, go ahead.
One thing government is the reason why charging is so expensive is the upfront cost is expensive, and to amortize it over 10, 20 years makes sense, but businesses try to return money sooner. So this is where governments are really important to build in the infrastructure. And I don't know if we can really depend on the private sector to do that, because governments can deal with the longer term range. And so the other thing I want to say is covered charging is really great, because EVs don't like to get very hot when charging. It actually hurts the batteries. So being able to cover charging spots with solar panels is really a great idea. And then thirdly, one thing that's not mentioned is EVs can provide a backup source of electricity. And in fact, hopefully we can get a proposal where people can charge their vehicles during the day and then push back electricity from their EV batteries back into the grid when the demand is high and the generation is low.
Yeah. Vehicle to, it's V2X, vehicle to grid, vehicle to building. That's technology. Even with the Ford, right? The Ford smart chargers, you're actually able to power your house with their capabilities. So there's a lot of new stuff happening. And what I'd like to do, since we're out of time, is just make a pitch for upcoming events. And then if anyone has any follow-up questions or would like to discuss further, I'll stay on. But I just want to call attention that next month, the 27th, and there's a link in the chat that I put on our calendar here. You can find this on our website. We're actually going to be hosting a webinar with a whole bunch of leaders from HECO, County R&D, County Mass Transit for Hawaii County. We have Robin Shishido with the State Department of Transportation. That he's going to be talking about the contract that the state has with sustainability partners. By the way, I work for sustainability partners, so full disclosure. And also we have Katie Rooney from Ulupono Initiative, who's going to be our keynote, talking about sustainable transportation, the transition to a more sustainable transportation future. So she's going to talk about not just electric cars, but vehicle miles reduction strategies, all the different things that need to happen for us to meet our transportation needs, but not necessarily have to do so with a reliance on fossil fuel. So that's happening the 27th, and then the week of the 23rd through October 2nd, there's going to be a whole bunch of National Drive Electric Week events. We are going to have we're partnering with Blue Planet and other organizations for events across the state. And so there's going to be at least one on each major island. And so there will be something that everyone can participate in. And we'll be publishing the details as soon as those are available. And I want to make mention of Tabby, who's also on the call. Tabby is with, Tabby, are you there? With with Blue Planet. So she and I and Nanette and others are collaborating on the Drive Electric Week activities. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff happening. And we're also going to be engaging with the Hawaii Auto Dealers Association. So hopefully we'll be able to get them involved as well in terms of getting some of the latest EVs, accessible to the public. Anyway, with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to just offer, if anyone else has anything they want to raise, any ideas, any invitations to engage, happy to stay on with you. Otherwise, we can wrap up. So thanks everybody for joining, and really appreciate. Until the next time, we'll keep, what's the word? We'll keep kicking gas.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, one thing that I think, another thing about EVs that are really important is their longevity, since they don't have as many moving parts.
Yeah.
So one problem in Maui is, all the junker cars, because at some point, around, 50, 70,000 miles, it becomes really expensive to repair the car, and you just can't afford it. People just junk them all over the place. Whereas an EV, there's no moving parts, and the battery does decline, but it declines gradually.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you have I have a Bolt, and, the nominal range is 240 miles, but, if it dropped to 80-mile range, it's still a very usable car in Maui.
Yeah.
So that would be, a great thing for the Maui environment. Just stop junking cars.
But the environment in general, right? And I just wanted to do a pitch here on circularity. So one of the things that Hawaii EV is focused on, and it's more of a mid-long term, and that is creating the pathway for us to be able to deal with what would otherwise be an unmanageable waste stream. So when we talk about what happens to batteries, EVs that no longer are able to go as far as they need to be usable, what do you do with those batteries? Once those batteries are expired, what do you do with those batteries? The same thing could be said about energy systems. So primarily solar panels, right? After 30 years or so, we're going to start to see, and we're probably starting to see it now, a waste stream that's starting to accumulate. We have to figure out now what to do so that for solutions that have a second life, so EV batteries can make it into grid storage as an example, or stationary storage. And beyond that, there needs to either be in-state recycling of raw materials, or we have contracts with, Redwood Materials, all these companies on the mainland to recycle the batteries. Same thing with solar panels. We can't be dumping those things into the landfill. So that's another area I think is really important for us to focus on, and it's one of our pillars in terms of policy areas, is to kind of start looking at that and figuring out a way to ensure that that doesn't become an issue in the future. Kevin, you have your hand up?
Yes. I just wanted to do a quick plug on a platform I developed a couple years ago, and it's still developing, but it's called Ponomap.com. And how it EV, it's actually all things sustainability. But I found when I was using, either the Tesla app or the ChargePoint app, and there's a couple other ones, that there was not a thorough list of all of the EV chargers. And so the Ponomap platform is actually anybody with a Gmail can log in really easily and create an account, and they can mark EV chargers on that platform, and it's available for everyone to use for free. That business is also a nonprofit that I developed. Been trying to get government funding for it, but we fell short the last couple of years for grants. Other projects got funded instead, which is great. Lots of cool things going on in the county. Look at any state grants, but we were looking at county grants with the sustainability division with that. It also, if you're going to use that platform, it does more than just EV chargers. If you want to list like recycle bins or places where you can do your electronic recycling, or composter, or businesses that do support any sort of sustainable things, there's a giant list of. The whole point is it to be a accumulation of data and useful information for anybody to be more sustainable on the islands, whether they're a resident or a tourist. So that's just some of the.
Thanks, Kevin.
That'll be great. Can somebody post that somewhere, because I'm driving and I can't write it down.
It's just
What is it?
Ponomap.
Ponomap?
Pono,
Search.
like be Pono.
Oh,
Is that .org?
okay.
.com.
Okay. Ponomap.com. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I sense that we can go on. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about as far as energy goes, as far as circularity and recycling, and even some of these market-based solutions that will facilitate the transition to clean energy. John, we're leading an effort on carbon pricing, putting a price on carbon pollution as a way to incentivize movement away from fossil fuels. We've got a national effort. Ron Riley and I are involved in that. I mentioned earlier, by the way, Sustainability Partners. So Sustainability Partners is a infrastructure finance company. It's a public benefit corporation, and we're working with the state to electrify its fleet. And as part of that solution, we're including charging infrastructure, including microgrids where necessary. So we have a contract with the state to essentially convert all of the fleet vehicles. And it's not just cars and trucks. There are forklifts, there are garbage trucks, there are, you name it, anything that has an internal combustion engine. If there is an electric version or zero emission version of that vehicle, we're able to support that. Now there are supply chain issues, so there's a big order for Ford F-150s, but we're having to wait, right? We're having to wait until the production is ramped up. But I just wanted to share that this is an opportunity to address one of the things that someone raised here, which is the fact that infrastructure is expensive, and we need to rely on government. It's not just the private sector, but there's a third way, and that is infrastructure finance, and that is where the government is actually able to pay for a service. Right, it's an OpEx thing. They don't have to buy equipment or infrastructure. A third party comes in, and if the use fee is acceptable, it makes sense from an economic perspective, then there's a deal, and it's evergreen, meaning the county or the government need not actually worry about cars, aging, because the company is actually going to replace the vehicles when they need to be replaced, replace the batteries when they need to be replaced, update solar installations when they need to be reinstalled. So I just wanted to highlight that. That's another thing that's happening. And in the event on the 27th, the State Department of Transportation guy, Robin Shushito, is going to share the progress that we're making with airports, highways, and harbors. So I just want to let you know that that's a very exciting thing that has transpired that I'm now involved in. And I want to be involved because I want to speed up our transition to clean transportation. With that, I think we can conclude, unless anybody else has questions or comments.
Oh, I have a plug. There's an app called Need to Charge, and I encourage people to start using it. It basically, if somebody is, at a charger and you need the charger, you can use the app using their license plate number to contact them saying you need to charge, and if they would be so kind to, unplug if they, can afford to do so. And on the mainland, the problem is a lot of people kind of hog chargers, and then somebody who really needs it doesn't have one. So it's not an issue yet, but
so that's a need to charge app. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
The app is called Need to Charge.
Okay.
I just had a quick comment. I was trying to save the chat and I'm only getting a partial transcript. Is it possible for you to send me a transcript to my email or something? Because it's not working for me.
Mojo, what's your email address?
So it's Mojo, M-O-J-O, at hedonesiahawaii.com. H-E-D as in dog, O-N as in Nancy, I-S-I-A, Hawaii.com.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you joining. Have a great weekend. Aloha.
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 Thank you, everybody, for the good info. Noel, I'll try to get in touch with you soon.
Okay, David. Thank you. Take care. Bye now.